but this is really important to me, and I'd like to be just the smallest little spark of awareness, because this is a crime against humanity, just like any Holocaust, any genocide. This is a really, really deep, deep problem, and people need to, we just can't turn away from it. We have to. I think that if we all turn toward it, that would be a really good step. Do you know?
Absolutely. Well, that's a process of shedding light on it. And there's an interesting kind of a spiritual thread through this as well. The name of the book is Karma. So, and of course, it takes place in countries such as India and where the Hindu religions are practiced. And can you share a little bit about the title and some of the spiritual aspects of the book?
Yeah, it was a process of my pondering and my development of my own education along the years that I wrote the drafts, and I became really deeply involved with my character, Meredith Fitzgerald. But the very, very first thing that happened to me, Lance, was and this was before Google, believe it or not. I mean, it's so hard to imagine a time when we had to go to the library to do our research, but you know that old saying, right, what you know? Well, I don't know anything, so I always have to research everything I do.
Right, me too.
And so I stack up piles of books, and I read piles of books on every subject that I write about. And so I went to the library to look under white slavery in the Dewey Decimal System, remember that? And and that I couldn't find anything, so I asked the librarian, and she brought out the Library of Congress book, and so it was referenced under prostitution. And both of us were really speechless, and it was just so shocking to me, because I knew even back then that we were talking about systematic rape, forced drug addiction, and torture. And here these poor people were being categorized as prostitutes, and everybody knows they're the scum of the earth, right? And so that was a real shock to me. I thought, how unfair and how awful. And then, as I learned more, I understood that they all suffer from post-traumatic stress. And I learned this because I was, like you said, really involved in trying to make my character believable. And so I had to live her experience, and she was traumatized and blaming herself, because that's part of post-traumatic stress. Okay, so that's 2 strikes. And then in many countries of the world, especially India, where my story takes place, sex slaves are often condemned, more often than not. And the basis is the fact that people believe they brought it on themselves because it was their karma. And I thought, that just didn't sound right to me, even though my character is living that. And she's got the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu Bible. It's the only possession she's allowed to keep. And then she has Mrs. Poor, who we mentioned earlier, the demented woman who, with her own really demented spiritual views, talking to her about karma. And then Mrs. Poor's brother, Mr. Shantaram, so he's really twisted, and he's got his own views, twisted views on karma. And so I thought I really wanted to explore this from all angles. And what I ultimately learned, because I am a researcher, and if Meredith was reading the Bhagavad Gita, I had to read it too, so I read it. And then I did some more exploration, and what I found was that, and I'm making this really simplistic because I am not a Hindu scholar, okay?
Right.
But just that karma, as it's interpreted by the Bhagavad Gita, does not mean cause and effect necessarily. It's not that you did something bad and something bad's going to happen to you. Because don't we all know really despicable people and their lives are going really, really well? And we know saints, right? I mean, just incredible people that every time you turn around, you're hearing something bad that happened to them. Really tragic, right? So how could that even make sense? And does a 5-year-old deserve to be raped, or does that Eastern European girl that's being turned out in the street in Florence because she wanted to feed her baby, did she deserve it? So karma really just defines the world at large. So if you try to be good, you try to do good things and contribute, you're contributing to the good karma of the world. If you're a bad person, you're contributing bad karma to the world, but it's not necessarily going to come back at you. So I wanted to have that as my overarching message because I care so much. I cared so much from that first 15 minutes of research about women being blamed and women being further victimized by society, that I wanted to have that be the message of the book, that they weren't to blame.
Absolutely, yeah, I got that message loud and clear, and I agree with that. What are the 3 ways that women and children are trapped in sexual trafficking?
Okay, so in our country, it's generally coercion. So that means somebody will swoop down at a bus stop or on the Internet and tell a girl she's beautiful and I can take care of you and I care about you, I can provide security, nobody's ever cared for you like I care for you. Or it can be an offer for modeling, dancing, acting, that kind of thing. And in the case of these Eastern European girls, waitresses, nannies, housekeepers. And also that happens in other countries too, like Philippines and Indonesia, where they think they're going to go to Saudi Arabia or other Middle Eastern countries to be housekeepers, and they're really going for both, right?
Right.
So that's coercion. And then there's kidnapping, just plain out abduction, which my main character, so I have 3 characters in the book, and they all represent one of these things. So Camille, the other American girl.
Oh, I love her.
Thank you. Yes, she was too big for a while. I had to tone her down a little bit.
Yeah. She's almost borderline now, but I love her anyway.
So Camille is an example of coercion. So she answered an ad to be a dancer in Tokyo. Okay, and so she flew to Japan with her babysitting money. Meredith was abducted, and then Serena, the little girl, is sold by her parents. So that happens a lot in impoverished countries. And you hear stories now and then in the United States, and I'm sure it happens a lot more than we know it's happening, where, the boyfriend takes the girl or the mother takes the girl and sells her for sex, girl or boy. So those are the 3 methods, coercion, kidnapping, and buying children from their parents.
Wow, and of course, once that happens, there's really no going back. Once those wheels are in motion, it's pretty final. Unless somehow, do the girls ever break away? I mean, they're kept in a state of being high on usually heroin and some other drugs to keep them docile. And so they develop a horrible addiction to heroin, and so there's one of the chains that holds them there. And then, of course, another would be the fear that you mentioned earlier, when a whole group of girls is picked up, and then one of them is always going to be the one that resists more than the rest, and they use her as an example by cutting ears off or poking her eyes out or, acid on the face or whatever it is that they do that, destroys her, and then she's just laying there dying. So the rest of them all kind of fall into lockstep.
Wouldn't anybody?
Oh my God, yes. That's what's so scary about it. I mean, I felt like I was in there, and it was just, my goodness. Your book is so well written. I just can't say that enough.
Thank you.
You just have to, be determined to know that there's a journey there, and don't get put off by the subject matter in the first, chapter or the first few pages. because like you, I just said to myself, well, this has something that is valuable for me, and I don't know what it is yet, but I need to look at this. And so like I said, I forced myself to get through that one little moment, and then from then on, I could not put it down. It's riveting.
Thank you.
It really
I hear
is.
that a lot. It's really great as an author. You want to hear that, but I can never hear it enough.
Oh, I know, absolutely. So, and you're giving me some ideas for me writing my next book.
Oh, good.
You know, about how to approach it, because, you know, like you said, the hard part is, well, I want to write something that makes a difference, but what? Mm-hmm. And, you know, lots of ideas come up, but I like the way you selected this, and you did your research, and you brought into light something that was just stunning in its character. It's totally character-driven, and the images from the places that you take the girls to and the trafficking to are just so vivid that they're unforgettable. They really
Thank you.
are. And I read a lot of books, so you know they aren't all like that.
Thank you. Well, I had it, of course, vetted by a number of experts. One was a doctor. She was a psychiatrist, because I wanted to make sure that was right. And then I also had an Indian friend read it, and so I did my research, and then I had it vetted very, very carefully. I wanted to have things accurate.
Yes, because even though it is a work of fiction, it's so close and so thinly veiled that you just can't escape the truth of it. I mean, it just stares you in the face, but I just love the characters, and I just can't say enough good things about the book. I'm telling you, it's a must read.
Thank you. I do want to point out too, Lance, that it's not just India and Turkey, and I just use those places because I traveled extensively there, and I knew that I could get the settings right and the characters right, but it's every country of the world. And I do actually have that disclaimer in my book, because I don't want to be pointing fingers at any country. I'm pointing fingers at the entire globe. Shame on us for letting this happen. Right.
And here it is, the 20th century, and we're supposed to be, you know, nearing the dawn of a golden age, according to many who claim that, you know, we're moving into some new phase of evolution. But we can't be bringing this old garbage into a new paradigm. I just don't see how it could possibly. It just doesn't fit. You know, all of that horrible behavior and corruption and violence against human beings. It's just so prevalent. And then, you know, you could easily write a book about the suburbs. And what goes on with parents and uncles and babysitters and, you know, this and that. I mean, the suburbs are a hotbed of incest and rape and abuse, and it's just, you know, we don't see it and we don't want to see it, so we wait for the news to come on and find out about so-and-so was killed for, you know, having raped his kids, and they grabbed the shotgun and blew him away.
Well, you know, the experts say that that buying a prostitute is an act of violence against women. And if you look at it like that, then you start looking at these 50 million transactions a day, probably plus, as acts of violence, acts of anger against women, and you think, why are men so angry with women? Maybe we need to look at that. What about our global culture has made men so angry with women? And I think that's something that's a very interesting question, and something we need to look at. That is an interesting question. You know, you could easily make an argument that